Welcome to How Things Connect, where we share insight and wisdom on healing, empowerment, and regeneration. I'm so delighted today to have as my guest the Dank Duchess. The Dank Duchess is an international hashish consultant, cannabis cultivator, and public speaker whose mission it is to help spread awareness of cannabis and psychedelic wellness globally. With 18 years of cultivation experience to her credit and trained by the late hash master Frenchy Cannoli, she has dedicated the last 7 years to educating hundreds of thousands of people via print, film, and social media about high quality cannabis and hashish. She's also been featured at conferences including Spirit Plant Medicine Conference, Boston Freedom Rally, Outside Lands, and the Emerald Cup. Welcome, Duchess. How are you?
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm feeling very, very good. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So happy to have you on the show. So you just came back from the Emerald Cup. Is that right?
I did. It was as usual a phenomenal experience. I'm beaming at this time because it's been a while, because of COVID. We did not have an in-person event as usual last year. So this was a really good time to reconnect with people. And I had two functions. I at one point was hosting a joint rolling competition, and that was fun. But the real highlight of the weekend was I did a panel on the mushroom movement with Del Potter, Chef Nikki, and Michael Symbiote, William Padilla, who has been using social media to really, really push cultivation of mushrooms and mushroom wellness to everybody. So that was fantastic.
Excellent. That sounds, I wish I could have been there. So what have you seen sort of now that we've gone through almost 2 years of the pandemic? What have you seen on the scene, and then feeling that, because now you just had a sort of re-engagement with the community, what's shifted, do you feel, in this community or in the attitude or whatever's, whatever other insight you might have?
Well, I mean, we are seeing a steady push toward this concept of not just wellness, but do-it-yourself wellness. So you're growing some of your own food, you're growing your own mushrooms if you're doing things like that, growing your own cannabis, and really understanding that it's high time that we take agency over our own wellness, that we don't depend necessarily on established companies, which for the wellness market, for the most part, has been big pharma. And we have seen the problems of that complete dependence on pharmaceuticals and, the backlash on that. So what you're seeing is a lot more companies from the business side focusing on capturing the zeitgeist of the self-care movement, right? Self-care, wellness, take care of yourself. But on the individual level, the tenuousness of life, I think in the last 2 years has given us the glaring and made it very obvious that we have to work with each other and care for each other. When I saw people, I said to them, I'm really happy to see you on the other side, because there are many people in our industry, in our community, that are not here right now. A lot of it having to do with COVID or the circumstances around it. So we only have our wealth, and our health. That's the wealth that we have, right? And I saw that from the younger people who sometimes have this idea of I'm going to live forever. They don't really have the idea that they're going to live forever. And so steps need to be taken along the way. And that's positive. So we saw a lot more organic food options. We saw a lot more better placement of companies that weren't necessarily selling the hottest, hypest weed, but we're selling the concept that we all deserve to be happy. And I like that.
Fantastic. And that's actually really good news. We've seen, what we've seen though also, there's also more polarization through this process, but definitely, it's great to hear someone who's on the ground seeing that that's actually happening more, having this agency and sovereignty over one's health. There's two remarkable things that have been going on, right? First of all, the tide has really turned. And this is not like this moment, but this has kind of been happening slowly through the years. The turning of the tide of decades of ignorance and suppression of sacred and theogenic medicines and plants, such as, there's cannabis, obviously, but there's ayahuasca, there's peyote, there's psilocybin mushrooms, and many others. And that I think as people learn more and understand them better, and they understand how to work with them with skill, there is so much potential for all of our, not just physical health and mental health, but emotional and spiritual health as well. So it's, yeah. And I think the second thing, I mean, you just completely emphasized, that's really important, is that people are looking for ways to heal that go against the prevailing narrative, politically, socially, and also sort of as an alternative to mainstream medicine, right? Again, a trend that has been going on for some time, but it, recently, because of the reburgeoning of all the psychedelic plant medicines, it's been really interesting to see. So I have a question for you. What are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about both hashish and cannabis? Meaning, if they had a greater understanding of some of these, or maybe an elimination of some of these misconceptions, that would open actually their mind to these medicines.
The biggest misconceptions, I mean, it seems so simple, but that cannabis is bad for you. Cannabis as a blanket, cannabis is bad for you. That cannabis has no, I mean, this is the prevailing federal thought. Cannabis has no medical value, which is of course ridiculous considering the government has a patent on the neuroprotective properties of cannabis. So what would open up people's minds? We think about this all the time because it's not from the facts, but maybe from an emotional standpoint, that cannabis and other substances and other sacred medicines provide some kind of crutch. And if you could just get it together yourself, then you wouldn't need something like that. Not understanding that we have an inborn endocannabinoid system, like literally born with it, which receives all, has receptors all through the brain, the heart, the stomach, the gut, on our muscles, and our reproductive system, all for our bodies to be healthier. The cannabis's main job is homeostasis, and disease comes of lack of homeostasis. Cannabis is trying to get you back to a balanced place. And so if people could understand that it's not about it being magic, but really, really puzzle pieces. There are things that peyote does for the mind that cannabis is not going to do. San Pedro does for the mind that cannabis is not going to do. For a lot of the prevailing illnesses that we have, and a lot of the ways that we need to heal in big chunks, cannabis can address a lot of that. And if people can understand that it is a plant, it is a plant that works in balance with us, then they might be more open to it. But there are a lot of religious overtones, or like political overtones, and just social overtones. I mean, it's not even necessarily willful ignorance. Sometimes it's a situation of the way we have our society set up. I think when we talked before, you talked about the immigrant experience. My family's from Panama, and a lot of people who are coming from other countries trying to give a better situation for their families do not want to, in a way, rock the boat. So there's not a huge curiosity about what we call alternative, especially if it's illegal, because that can't be right, because we want to fit in what society is doing. And it's sad that we call it alternative when in truth, this is the original. What we have as mainstream right now, which is rather than preventative, is a symptom curing type of system. Not even symptom curing, symptom alleviating to some degree. But we're just getting along, people sick for like 12 years. Yeah, I've been taking this medication. Well, when your body's not coming into balance, something is missing with this particular model. Right. But in the immigrant experience, there's a feeling of believing in the authority of what's being said. And we have doctors who know nothing about these sacred medicines. So believing in authority and not wanting to have trouble. That really creates an insular ignorance that it's hard to break out of, considering how much our society really slaps you on the hand for nonconformity. That's really sad.
For sure. And thank you for bringing in the immigrant perspective, because that's a really interesting aspect. And yeah, and My goodness, that was packed with a lot of stuff. I mean, even the
Sorry.
idea of anyone, no, it's great. It's great because reminds me, the whole idea of authority. Someone in a white lab coat, you trust them, right? Automatically. It reminds me of the Milgram experiments, where you had someone in a white coat saying to the subject, "Oh, keep giving this guy electric shock," and the guy is
Yep.
screaming. And he's like, "No, keep giving it," the famous experiment, right? And the person will comply. I think it was some crazy percentage. I think I want to say at least 80% or 90% or more people comply through the end. And wonder why in previous atrocities, why people, how people could commit certain crimes. And it's the psychology of it, right? And so I mean, that's a huge part. And then there's another thing you just brought up a little earlier, which is this idea of how to use plant medicines as part of a healing system. And this idea of systems thinking, which is very much what nature is about. Nature is not one piece plus this next piece equals, this. It's all interconnected. It's all a web. And there is so much to learn from that. And I think where Western medicine comes in, and it's not, I mean, there's a lot of good to be said about allopathic medicine or that approach, depending on what it is. It's depending on what ailment you're trying. If you have a broken leg, you're going to get a cast. You're going to get, that healing, right? But what's interesting, and where I think the treasure is really not just really understanding that and using a systems way of really looking at things. And we don't, and we've most of us who, and even those of us who've grown up in the East, because the prevailing medical sort of perspective is still allopathic, that everything is about, oh, you have a symptom, yes, give me a pill to fix this, as opposed to, well, why is my shoulder hurting? It may have nothing to do with my shoulder. It may have to do with my emotional stress, something else. And I mean, it could be structural, it could be something else, but that there is a great system, whether it's through psychedelic plant medicines or even other, forms of medicine approaches like TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, or Ayurveda, where we start to look at the whole system, right? We understand that how our minds connected to our hearts, to our physicalities, to pain, to how we are in the world. And all of this is connected. And so I think that to me is almost the greater underlying factor, because we're not saying, it's like no one's saying, hey, don't take the antibiotic when you have an infection. Sometimes you're going to have to do that, right?
Exactly.
But then allopathic medicine and non-allopathic medicine, holistic medicine, and also plant medicines all have a place. And, I feel that you, of course, have had some, so much experience working with not just cannabis and hashish, but also psilocybin mushrooms. And you're super knowledgeable with all of it. And you've also shared previously about your own growth and working in tandem with both cannabis and psilocybin for your personal growth. Could you share a little bit of that story?
Sure. So I'll start with my part of this painting behind me. So when we were having the pre-conversation, I'm sorry if you can see it, it's really big. It's 4 feet by 5 feet, right? So it was a large endeavor. I jumped into it. I had been painting mushrooms for a while. Apparently, I've gone through my things and seen that it's been about 13 years now, but I thought it was relatively recent. But painting what was in my heart, and while that was making me happy, I was falling into the ego trap of how does this compare, right? And so this painting ended up taking 6 months when it could have been a shorter time, but maybe it needed to be that amount of time for me to see the negative patterns, or the not negative, but the problematic patterns that were holding me back with creativity. that was not seen until I did a macro dose of around 4.5 grams, maybe 4.75 grams, where I was able to really physically see the blockages I was putting in front of myself based on this idea of the separateness of me and another artist, and then my ego against theirs, right? So that was like a major shift that allowed me to, get to working. But I also have ADD, and my anxiety flares up pretty often. It's the microdosing that allowed a continuous, able to finish it. You understand? So it was the microdosing that showed me why I was having problems with it. It was the microdosing that helped keep me on track. And it was the cannabis in between all that kept it all smooth, right? So that's just one thing. That's just one part of my life. And I want that to wend through everything, because as I'm having this conversation with you, I realize, and I mean, just being really plain, that that's really just what I want to focus on, this personal wellness and this personal growth and this movement to freedom. I wasn't really understanding that till something you just said right there. And it's the cannabis and hashish and the psychedelics that have helped me through this. I lived a really straightforward, not even typical, but a straightforward, like, achieve, 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 and things will work out for you type of situation. I grew up in New York, from Brooklyn. I went to all the right schools, all the specialized programs, went to Stuyvesant High School, went to Howard on scholarship, mathematics, everything is black and white, cause and effect. And it wasn't until I was introduced to cannabis after college, after I started feeling like a continual tightening and in a way of, this is not really making sense, because I am 1 + 1ing, and I'm getting 2, but I'm not getting 2 in happiness, but I'm doing 1 + 1. I'm not understanding what the problem is. And when I had cannabis for the first time, big life shift, because from having such a binary thinking that was rooted completely in logic, I got to see the grays. Rather than the blacks and the whites, I got to see the grays. And it affected every part of how I made music, how I did art, how I did business, how I just dealt with myself. And that's on the cannabis level, which opens up my mind to different perspectives. For someone like me who was very much othered and alone and lonely for a lot of my life, just kind of focused on really math and such like that, cannabis smoothed a lot of the edges and opened me up to be within a community of people. However, I really wasn't still as open as I needed to be, such that when I left Florida, because I moved to Florida right after college for 13 years, I lived in Florida. I was all about the wellness there. I had a massage company with my husband. We promoted this idea that, we all deserve to be happy and all that, but I still was unhappy. I lived in South Beach. By the time I was leaving, I lived in a penthouse. It was nice, but I was so unhappy. I just couldn't understand why I was so unhappy. And I was growing cannabis in Florida, which was illegal. Statute of limitations has passed, so which was illegal, and that furthered my loneliness because I couldn't let anyone in, because then they would know, right? Moving to California and being able to be as open as I could possibly want to be about cannabis changed my life. I feel like it extended my life. Even when I moved at 35 and I could tell, oh my gosh, my life is going to expand, just because of the dichotomy of existence. I was one way for the majority of who knew me. And then I had this whole secretive life, which begins to eat at you. Like it forms a pit in your stomach where you feel like nobody knows you because you're so secretive. So I was secretive with social anxiety, and I was growing cannabis. I was involved in cannabis. My social circle were Congress people and Southern people who I did not feel like they were going to understand. And I felt terribly alone. And coming here and being able to grow cannabis openly and speak on it and create community. I think we don't realize how important it is for us to really not just have family or just have friends, but have a group of people or a system around which you can unzip that mask and fully come forth. And that's what cannabis allowed me to do. Hashish came into my situation very early in coming into California because I met Frenchie, who ended up teaching me how to make hash so that I could write about hash and experience the world of hash, so to speak. And hash is a different experience, so it's all together. Whereas cannabis can be very mind opening, and hash also, really good hashish can make you really focus on a particular idea. So when I'm dealing with my particular wellness right now, I mix cannabis and hashish so that cannabis can open my mind to see the possibilities. Hashish can help me focus on a few of those possibilities, and psilocybin as a microdose to help me finish the project, because I do have ADHD and I have 1,000 projects going on at any time. And that overwhelmingness can, make me feel paralyzed and such like that. I need all of those things. I don't see them as crutches, but rather part of the fabric of my existence. Just like my body needs water to be able to flush toxins, I need my cannabis and hashish to be able to not feel the tightness that a lot of things come on me. I'm Black, I'm a woman, I'm queer. Sometimes it's like easier for me to, sometimes I'm super wrapped up. Not sometimes, I'm always super wrapped up. And I need to be able to like put down those burdens. And it's not so easy as just like, oh, just think of something else. Because meditating works really well for me. Meditating with some cannabis works especially well. So it's all these things that I'm using in conjunction. And when I had a really bad bout of depression in 2018, where I really isolated myself from everybody, I was using cannabis and hashish in a wrong way, just to deaden everything. I can function, I can smile still, people will think I'm fine, but I was using it totally disrespectfully. And it was a psilocybin trip in January of 2019 that showed me the error of my ways, or how I was so going away from my mountain. I was so in the wrong direction, but also at this moment, you could just turn. At this moment, you don't have to go through some long pilgrimage to understand why. At this moment, you can make this decision to turn. And that changed my life. That was like January of 2019. And I decided to be vulnerable and be okay if I could be hurt. And I have to say, my smile has been truer and my flow has been better than it has ever been. I know that was a long story. I saw a meme recently that said, just so you know, healing doesn't come in a dose. Meaning like, unfortunately, we're now coming, not we are as a blanket statement, but one of the pitfalls is that without a good conscious approach to the system of healing, we're now saying, I'm depressed, let's throw a mushroom at it. Guess what? You can be depressed, throw a mushroom at it. It's not going to fix your depression. It doesn't work like that. It might show you what are the reasons, but you still have to do the work. We still have to do the work, And so this concept of there's a problem, we're going to just put something on top of it. You can put penicillin on top of it, or you can put, cannabis on top of it. You're still just putting something on top of it without understanding how all of the connections work, right? I find it's disrespectful to be so lazy. To be so lazy is disrespectful. To be like, you know what? I went through all this trauma and, I'm going to eat this, and suddenly it is going to fix it all for me. Not understanding that this is, and that's a using. You do this job for me. Now, let us work together. Can you show me a thing? Can you learn from me? Because they learn from us. They do. Just like apples have found out ways of making themselves sweeter, they learn from us. Can you show me a thing about me? Can I express into the common consciousness that we all share a thing that will affect you? That's the working together. And if we don't understand that they're not in service of us, They are not in service of us. We act like because we can pick them up and I can choose to have 4 grams or I can choose to have 0.4 grams, that the mushroom is my servant. That mentality in itself is disrespectful. Then we have, like, of course, partying, and I get conflicted on that because celebration in itself is sacred. So I'm pro that. But then again, it's maybe the behavior of popping 5 grams every week while you get down is indicative of some other kind of issue, to not even to talk about just the exploration, because nothing's wrong with that, or escape, but the unawareness of the treasure that came back every single time, and we just packing up and just like having, oh, and there was that experience and that experience, instead of unfolding, going through all the folders and all the ups and downs. Because when you really unpack it, even on the good trips, there are some things that are like, oh, didn't know that about myself. That's another facet of my own behavior. So while I'm very excited about people's willingness to go down that path, it is a little disheartening and disconcerting to see a willy-nilly capitalistic approach. It's like, okay, we're gonna go take you to the $10,000 retreat, which is gonna be better than this $50 situation in this quiet room by yourself. This is the retreat that's gonna fix your situation. It's still a sense of other and not understanding this is a personal growth. And if it's a personal growth that requires a look inward and a real jotting down of truthiness, who we pretend to be, who we think we are, and who the I am really is. Until we understand how all those things work out, then it will always be disrespectful. But then again, Stephanie, at the end of the day, these sacred plants are like, and that's still fine. Like, yeah, for all the nonsense you're doing, that's still fine. So it's just kind of like, so
that's nature. Nature. Yeah. If you keep stopping on something, it might not grow for a while, but you leave it, it'll come back. You can yell at it, it'll still grow, and that's but this is exactly it. I mean, this is the beauty of nature and what it teaches us. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, and absolutely, it's a relationship is what it is. And what, especially since you grow and cultivate as well, you're not just what have the plants taught you? What are some amazing things that maybe you want to share about what they've taught you?
Sure. Not to belabor this point, but the systems, okay? So the plants, I'm growing indoors right now. I'm not growing outdoors in the soil. I don't have any terroir that I'm specifically adjusting my plants to. So I have to recreate that. If I'm going from a standpoint of, I need you to be the biggest and the fastest and the showiest, so I can put you on Instagram and everyone can love you, that I can give you like newts, grow faster, all the things that does not happen in real life. But when we work, but that doesn't make really good. But we work in conjunction with the systems of nature. I'm not feeding the plant. I'm addressing the soil so that it is an environment that the plant can do the best in. I'm addressing the air and the humidity so that the plant itself can bloom. But I'm not doing anything. We often feel like we are making things happen. We just need to allow, like, without being religious. So when I say this word, it's not about religion, but let go and let God, let go and let the flow. And if nothing else, the plants have definitely taught me that as long as I'm putting one step in front of the other with best intentions, the systems balance out. It's when we try to force our own beliefs of how things should be, when we start putting timelines that really are comparisons of what it should be. I mean, that should word is a terrible word. It just is. And we deal with what is in the here and now. Not what could be, what would be, but what is. And every time we just focus on the what is, we're good. It's just the what is.
Oh, well said. Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned once using the chillum pipe. knits the social fabric between people. Do you feel that, we kind of talked about this earlier, but do you feel that all of us are ultimately looking for community? And psychedelic and psychoactive plants have that capacity to connect people in a more loving and heart-centered way?
I mean, it does it on the fundamental level of literally this side of the brain now talking to this side of the brain. The web, it's not, it's so simplistic to think this leads to this, leads to this, or how about this branches this way, which this branches this way. And then suddenly the connections are stronger. They're supported by a whole lot more. They are faster, more efficient. We want to be loved. Even the most despicable person wants someone to understand him or her, or they. They just want to be, they want to feel a connection of, I see you. I see you. Not I see the outer shell, but I see you. That's it. And those plants allow us to get rid of some of the calcification around our pipes and things that would connect, that we just have past expectations and we have comparisons and we have society's mores and all that. We need to strip all of that so we can get those things connected and joined. And that's all it does. It helps us with that. And it works for those plants too. Hey, we're all in this together. If we can understand that we communicate with energy with our pets, every person who has a pet knows about like the time that you didn't feel good and the animal came and said something to you. They couldn't fix the fact that you couldn't pay the rent. They couldn't fix the fact that your mama died, but they understood that you needed connection. That's base, man. That's base. So yeah, totally. We all want it.
Yeah, and it's fundamental. And I feel like the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we sometimes forget that, you know, pets are in a way a more obvious example. We forget that nature and plants have the same capacity. Sometimes we kind of just, we have a hierarchical way of thinking about anything that what we perceive as outside of us. And I think there's a fundamental separation that actually makes us extremely lonely. It's the piece, it's the separation that actually cuts us off from ourselves fully and also from others, because we perceive the other, any other, and especially people who are othered for political reasons, for social reasons, for, you know, prejudicial reasons, more so. And all that does is create more division and more fear. So, yeah, and I feel that it's almost like it's in front of us, it's right in front of us, if we just sort of took the time to be present and to see and breathe that in. Tell us a little bit more about your passion for growing.
Ooh, I've been growing for a long time. 18 years, almost 19 years. And I mean, do you want to see my plants?
I thought you were still cultivating.
Yeah, I'm still cultivating now.
Okay.
I said, do you want to see my, well, I mean, it's 19 years. My bio was written last year. Do you want to see my plants?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll make it real fast. Watch this. Okay, so I am growing 6 plants in the flowering tent, and growing is the best thing. Look, I make hash. I'm known for making hash. I'm known for growing too, but this is the relationship I have with these girls. Oh my gosh. Okay. This. Okay, here's a tent. We're gonna see my babies. We're gonna see some babies. Turn around. So these are some of my babies here. So I did a lot of travel from like September. So I wasn't able to mind all the plants as well as I would. And these plants look different because they're different plants. So there was some yellowing, but they have popped back. That one had the most, like some of the most issues, but these are my poison peaches, and this is over here forbidden fruit cross, and this is blackjack. So I grow plants based on what will be good for me. I've grown a lot of plants, I've grown a small amount of plants, and right now this is manageable. And the reason why I have to mention that is because I mean, ego gets into everything. One reason I was sad in 2018 and in 2017, I was growing on my roof and I was growing 40 plants. They were huge, 7 feet tall. I was in a whole bunch of magazines. People were talking about it. It was like, Duchess, Duchess. And then my landlord kicked me off the roof and said I would get, I could get evicted, right? So now where am I without that persona of someone who grows huge amounts of plants? Where am I without my marriage was dissolving? Where am I without the concept of being somebody's wife? Where am I without all of that? And it has been a constant growth with and being truthful to myself about the fact that, yeah, I love growing very much, but I also loved the clout that came with it.
Mhm.
And I had to stop growing for a little bit to understand why I was growing. And I'm growing for that relationship and to understand myself better, take care of my own wellness, and to check my ego. So I had a couple problems with my plants. Like I said, I wasn't here doing a lot of traveling and such like that. And there was a time where I would never show that because I'm the Dank Duchess. I mean, like, they're writing about me, but now you got some yellowing on your plants. But you know what? It is.
Mhm.
So you got to see that. And you can
Real.
see I'm human. And
Mhm.
it is. And that seems so minor, but the plants teach me a lot more than like I learned other places. You're not on top of it, your plant's not gonna do well. If you are too overly focused on one thing, and not understanding it's a system of things, you're going to see an imbalance because balance is key. So I use the growing of the plants as a way to grow as a person because I can just understand it without some of the noise that comes with dealing with people. So I feel like the plants and my animals teach me a lot about how to deal with people, not from a standpoint of the other. That I know that seems, minor, but that's a major thing for me.
No, it's major. It's major, and it's a subtle and very powerful interaction.
That's it. It's a subtle interaction.
Yeah, but therein lies the amazingness of it. It doesn't loud. It doesn't have to be in your face. It's this beautiful message and this beautiful communication that is just speechless. And you have that. It's this relationship you have. Tangible, but on the other hand, very tangible. So yeah, thank you look at your smile.
I love it so much. I like really, really love it. Love it.
No, it's a joy, and it's just just so amazing to just hear your voice change and your face change and just being the proud mama of your babies. But that's exactly the point. I mean, when we have okay, listen, it doesn't have to be particularly cannabis plants, but I feel like anyone who gardens, anyone who takes care of another living thing, in today's sort of segment, we're talking about plants and psychedelic plants, but I feel like when you work with psychedelic plants or psychoactive plants, it's even a more tangible relationship in a way, because it's really, because not only are you looking at them, then you ingest them, then you have a whole other level of relationship. And what you said earlier was so amazing, is that they're actually getting something from us. Right. And it's such a crazy concept, but it's so true.
They are definitely getting something. Oh, they are. I mean, they are getting those plants. For one, if you like deal with your plants, you can tell the personality, and it has the word person in it, which is very human centric. You can tell the shifting energies with the plants. I'm telling you, you put some plants next to each other, they don't do well. They're not dealing well with each other. This is not the relationship to have. But it's a nuance. It's a nuanced observation that comes from being quiet, which I got to tell you, a little puff in the morning, a little breathing helps push back some of those intrusive thoughts so that I can be respectful in the space with those ladies and be there with them, not thinking about my car or this or that, which is like having 10 conversations at once. I'm only having this one conversation. I'm here and we're here now.
No, absolutely. What advice would you give to someone who, I would say two kinds of people. First, someone who has never worked with or taken cannabis or hashish,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people have done cannabis, maybe fewer people have done.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second question is, what would your advice be to someone who is considering growing, or what would you say to them?
I would say congratulations for one, for even just thinking about this. If you want to partake in cannabis for the first time, people don't really think about it, but set and setting matters still with cannabis. It's something that's psychoactive. It really just comes down to who you're with, what your mindset is at the time. So if you're trying for the first time, especially, and there's bound to be some preconceived notions of what's going to mean, and there's bound to be some level of shame, because we are still told from the beginning that it's bad. Like, there are cultivators who I talk to who sometimes are saying, sometimes I just wonder, like, they had a problem with their business. Was it because I was smoking cannabis? It's like an easy scapegoat, right? So you have to understand to arrest that kind of mentality, but know that it will be there and it's okay. Because after your first experience, if you have an experience, some people just can't inhale properly, but if you have experience, after that first experience, think about the changes that you have felt in your mind and body. Understand that you'll never, ever, ever, ever die. So you could just not worry about that fear of that fatality or something like that. And honestly, don't put all don't give cannabis all the credit, because it's not, again, cannabis is its own entity, and it's the relationship between your system and the cannabis that makes the magic. And sometimes you'll have some phenomenal award-winning cannabis that works terrible with your system. So therefore, it's not just the concept of just cannabis, it's the right cannabis with all the right components, all the right cannabinoids, all of that. So I would tell someone who wants to do cannabis or hashish for the first time, don't get stuck on the ideas of indica, sativa, or anything like that. Smell it. Frenchie used to say the nose knows. So smell it. If you like the smell, very likely it will work well with your body. If you don't like the smell, very likely it's not going to work well with your body. That's the first thing. But in terms of growing, grow what your body likes. There's no point in growing the hype strains that everyone's talking about, because the reason for growing the hype strains that everyone's talking about is to fulfill the gratification of the ego that you are a person. I am a grower that does this, instead of I grow. You know what I mean? I am a grower is different than I grow, and grow for the purpose of being in communion with the plant, taking care of your own medicine, taking care of your friend's medicine. But don't grow to become somebody, because that's still outside validation that is not going to make you warm at night.
Oh, that's a good point. How have you seen sort of the business change, the business of cannabis moving to sort of that side a little bit?
Well, okay, so Emerald Cup, like, one of the things that Emerald Cup is really lauded for is that it's a much more a culture and community cup. Okay, business is done for sure, but it's about the people, it's about the patients. We're constantly going patients over profits. I want to be optimistic, but I'm going to just give you facts and just say big corporations have pretty much taken over. Mom and pops are a very small part of the system. And we have a now diseased cannabis body system, because we've got one set has a lot of influence because they have money. And they're not realizing that we're all in the same boat. So they're just like, we're going to mine this whole situation for all the wood that we could possibly get, not understanding that's sinking all of us. It's not making better cannabis. It's creating a situation where people who would otherwise be able to help aren't, because they are locked out of the system. That part is not that great, hon. I'm going to say the access to good medicine at affordable prices is severely lacking in many places. And we're liking that, we in the community are liking that states that are onboarding right now, New Jersey and New York, are taking heed of where there've been problems. I mean, here in California with our 37% cannabis tax, you know what I mean? Where I know you don't know very much about just buying weed like that, but like on the legacy market, if you were getting 3.5 grams, there was a time when that was easily $35, $40. This 3.5 grams in the dispensary is going to be like $65 from tax. It's going to come up to 80 something dollars. How do you take care of yourself with that? How do you manage with that? So that part is problematic. But then on the good side, it's again unbalanced, after what we saw what happened last year, where a lot of the US had its eyes opened to many disparities, we're seeing a focus on diversity and inclusion, but unfortunately, sometimes it's coming at it with this like, there's a problem. Let's put a Black person. Let's put a person who's a woman. Let's put, a queer person, but not understanding that it's the culture. It's not that whole. It's all the things around that whole that made a hole in the first place. And if we don't address that, we're just going to have a hole in some other way. So now we're finding that diversity initiatives are falling flat because it's not understanding that we have to remake the system of how we think about it. If we are thinking from a standpoint of it's fine, but it only has this problem, so let's put the patch on this problem, no issue, that's the problem.
The symptom again. It's the similar disease analogy, right? It's like, just put a Band-Aid on it, just take this pill, go home, talk to me in 2 weeks, kind of. No, it's so true. And I feel that one of the things that I really want to highlight in terms of what you said is having the courage and the will to really explore what it is within ourselves that we are being confronted with, that we are running away from. Yep. Whether it's from a place of, I have to address my health, and then maybe if you really dig down deep, it's it's my relationship with my husband or wife. Oh, actually, it's my issue of self-worth. It could, you just all. And it's the same thing with business, because it's the outpicturing and manifestation of what is internally within ourselves, because that's how we interact. We interact based on our existing belief systems, our patterns of behavior, right? So if we're not actually going to the core of what it is that's making us react a certain way or do a certain way or treat people a certain way, no matter how much, it's the same box. You're just putting something prettier in the box, but it's the same box. And it's like we really have to address those underlying factors, which requires actually enormous emotional intelligence, number one, and the courage to actually face that truth. And I mean, I feel that personally, I don't know if you agree, that one of the greatest treasures or the greatest things that one can take away from in terms of experiencing plant medicines is this opening and connecting to one's emotions. Because most of the time, the reality is we are in such a mental world at this stage on the planet. We feel weird and awkward to talk about how we feel, truly. And it's still, talking about vulnerability, it's still hard. I mean, on a personal level, but definitely on a work level even. And how do we first of all, how do we ourselves reconnect with the full integrity of who we are as people, not just the mind, and then extrapolating that into the world, which actually ends up creating a more compassionate and kind world. And
that's the key right there, hon. The key, I feel sometimes when we address the twigs, we might address the branches, but we don't address the trunk. You got an oak tree trunk, you're gonna get acorns. You know what I mean? Unless you're gonna graft something different to the situation, you're always gonna get acorns. And so we say, like it's a hiring problem. That's a branch. No, if you're not understanding that your business needs a diverse pool of different perspectives, then you're going to have problems in other ways. You're going to have problems in your marketing when your entire marketing team is maybe made of men and you're like, oh, we want this to be for women, we're going to make it pink. That, that's a that's a mentality, you can see a hole, because fundamentally we're not understanding, again, not to just address it with something that we know of, but to come from the deep rooted sentiments and really look at ourselves. What you mentioned is true. We've got to look at ourselves, and that does take courage. And a lot of times we don't like pain. We like a lot of the easy answer, which is why dealing with psychoactive medicines, we sometimes find ourselves in the same place, no matter how spiritually woke we are. We're like, we're still just trying to fix it by just putting a thing on it, rather than getting past the, getting around everything with the crust of it, and getting past just what seems like the edge, and getting to the deep, deep parts. When we get to those deep, deep parts, that in itself can be a lonely place. And we become so held on to our ideas of who we are. And that's the ego attachment, right? And businesses become attached to the idea of what it is, such that it can't see itself as anything else. And when we're confronted with information that goes against what we have, what we know of ourselves, that cognitive dissonance is sometimes too painful. So if we're even going to address it, sometimes people just ostrich and don't address it at all. If you sort of address it, you're just like, well, we'll just dress up this pig. Doesn't this look like a beauty queen? No, it looks like a pig with lipstick on. You know what I mean? That's what it looks like.
Yes, completely. Where do you see this going in the future? What is your vision of what you feel, or how you envision the future of cannabis, hashish, and psychedelic medicine?
I mean, right now, sometimes you could talk about a pendulum, kind of like a lot of pendulums going at the same time. So they're different angles. I am going to say that I'm very happy to see the trend toward at least decrim across the board. Legalization brings in a lot of time all these ideas of commerce, but it shouldn't be illegal. So with cannabis and hashish, we're seeing a consistent push toward greater understanding and openness. That push has allowed psychedelic and sacred medicines to come in a little bit easier, a little bit more easy, because it's not like pushing through this new consciousness within mainstream of altering one's reality, which, why do we think that this is reality? But altering one's reality is something so new. It's like, oh, well, I can be, the cannabis has created a more fertile ground for some of these ideas. I do like that young people, with all their aver and their pump and energy, are understanding that their wellness is something not to address at 40, but they should address that. We got 15-year-olds talking about climate change. We got people understanding that we need to exercise. It's a system of us working together. Me making $150,000 out of the gate of college is not so satisfying when I know people are making 20,000. There's a idea that we're all in the same boat. So I think it may move slowly, but I think we're trending toward the right way. At the same time, because life is balanced, there is definitely a pullback on we're seeing more repressive situations, laws against women's bodies. We're seeing laws against humanity in many ways. Children without parents stuck in cages is a humanity problem. So whereas we're like championing that islands aren't going to be underwater because of climate change, we are also still turning a fairly blind eye to children in cages. So we have that push-pull, but at the end of the day, balance. I think it's going to get better. I also think it's going to get worse. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the truth of the situation. I think we're going to become, because there is a polarization, and I think we're going to understand a whole lot more where, our actual potential and where we can be. And I think that, but thankfully it's a shrinking minority, because a lot of times it's older, more established, more traditional mentalities that are being eroded from underneath with a constant, this is not going to be the way. This is not the way. That the system has to change. It has to change. It has to change. So I think there's that. It's really just a back and forth. Right now, we're swinging forward in some ways. We're swinging backward in some other ways. But cannabis and hashish will continue to be studied on a scientific level. I'm liking that because we're having greater acceptance. We're finally getting federal allowance towards stuff like MAPS doing trials on MDMA. We're doing all these ketamine trials. Psilocybin is showing up in media everywhere. And that in itself is crucial because we are people who are attracted to the glitz and the novelty. And psilocybin is, look, a lot of us are depressed. The anxiety is making our lives terrible. We are still, for the most part, still very insular because of COVID. Now is a perfect time for these medicines to work with us. Now that we see that the system that we've had before just does not work, we have seen a collapse on multiple fronts. I think now there's literally enough caca for some good things to happen. You know what I mean? And the mushrooms come from the caca.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. And I mean, it's funny because we're literally watching a lot of the old start to disintegrate, and you know, the mushroom spores and everything starting to grow is fantastic. And yet at the same time, you know, I feel that there are, and it's going to take a bit of time. It's going to take a bit of time. Something that may seem obvious to some people is still not obvious to others. And no, not at all, which is sometimes in itself very shocking because you're like, what do you mean you don't see? Hello, it's like right in front of us. But yeah, I'm very happy to hear how optimistic you are. So that brings, I think that's really important. And yeah, I'm glad you said that. And before we wrap up, what are some things that nobody ever asks you about, but that you wish someone did and that you want to share?
No one ever asked me about my steel drums. Even though they may know I play, they don't ask how that kind of like affects my life.
Well, please.
Sure. And so I will say that if somehow I could eat in the same place and my feet wouldn't get tired or my back wouldn't hurt, the level of clarity that I get through my trips and good smoke and a good meditation, standing in front of my pen, playing my music for the last 33 years, perfection. Wow. There's to me nothing as good as playing my pen. Nothing. I found it early and it like resonates in my heart. It's an easy 30 seconds. Nothing else matters. It's so fast and it's so perfect. And it's music. It's music and it's creation at the same time. And that's, I keep looking over there because my pens are over there and I just love them so much. But no one ever asked really about my music. And I play my steel drums for my cannabis. I bring them in there and I play and I play and I play. It's good. That system, that's a healing system there. The sound vibration is good for me. The seeing the growth, the pheromones that the plants are putting out, all of that. So that back room is like a system of happiness. I mean, I didn't even think about it like that. I didn't even think about it like that. But yeah, that's just about perfection for me.
Well, I'm really glad that you shared that with us. That is beautiful.
Yeah.
What is the best way for people to learn more about you, what you do, and what's the best way to connect?
Best way is at my website, thedankduchess.com. Second best way is actually Instagram. I'm very dedicated to reaching people where they are. And where they are happens to be on social media, the Dank Duchess, YouTube, the Dank Duchess, Twitter, the Dank Duchess. I keep with that same branding, and I'm always open to talk, really. And this interview right here, I have to tell you, Stephanie, this is one for the books, because it kind of actually shifted the direction of my mountain. It did. And I look forward to talking to you. It did. It totally did. I'm trying to keep it together so I don't cry, but whoa, it did. It really did. It really did.
Wow. That means a lot to me. Thank you. I'm so grateful to
Like
hear
it
that.
really did.
And what an amazing time that we just had, just connecting. And I'm so grateful for that. And thank you so much for your beautiful energy and presence and just flowing.
Yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been an honor.